Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, hello. Hi. Yes, I'm very interactive, so be prepared. Just keep you on your toes. Hey, Kimberly. Keep you on your toes, keep you awake today. My name is Michelle Materre. I'm a faculty member here at the New School, Media Studies and Film. I'm also the curator of a film series called Creatively Speaking. Ta-da. And today we're really excited to have a great program prepared for you. About 3 years ago, we did a conference here, a 2-day conference called Remixed and Remastered. Was anybody here that was there here now? Oh, no, okay. Oh, yes, Emily and Dan were, yes. Thank you very much, our documentary team. As a result of that conference, what we found was that there is a huge need to bring together filmmakers, scholars, film industry professionals, students, everybody interested in film, to have a real dialogue around issues of representation of people of color, building audiences, and utilizing the technology that we have at our fingertips now to really expand our worlds. And that's something that came out of that conference. So today, we have sort of an amalgam of things to give you a sampling of what Creatively Speaking is all about for those of you who haven't been to one of our programs before. But there are some people who follow me I can see in the audience. We had been up at a theater called Mist Harlem, a new theater uptown in Harlem, from last February to last June, doing a monthly series. We have also been at Harlem Stage. We have been at the University of the West Indies in Barbados, in Toronto, and have done a number of programs all over the country as well as internationally. And so today we're going to give you a sampling of some of the work that we find to be representative of the kind of things that you don't normally see in mainstream media, but that you should be seeing. And so I'm very excited. I'm going to tell you about the program in more depth very shortly. But, you know, these things take so much work to put together. I know it looks seamless, but it really isn't. It takes a lot of hands and a lot of thought and a lot of footwork. And I need to thank a bunch of people who have helped make today possible. Some of them are in the room, some of them are not, but I need to make sure that everybody knows I mention them. So we are co-sponsored today by the Office of the Provost here at the New School, the School of Media Studies, the School of Undergraduate Studies, Milano School of International Affairs, Management, and Urban Policy, as well as the Office of the Executive Dean of the New School for Public Engagement, as well as the Social Justice Initiative here at the New School. And so we will be hearing from some people from various aspects of those departments, but they made this all possible today, as well as people from the Creatively Speaking A-team, is what I call them, because these are my amazing students, interns, now alumni, who come back and work with me anyway, even though they don't have to now. And a lot of them are in the room as well. I'm seeing Destiny Jackson, raise your hand. Malika Shabazz, raise your hand, whose work you're gonna see today. Yes, you can applaud, they deserve applause. Empress Vernado, I think she's outside somewhere. Darren Mallet in the back. Alexandra Salazar. Who else is in the room? Nobody else is in the room, but they're all around and very helpful always. Couldn't do it without them, seriously. So today's program, we're going to see first two separate documentaries, and then we're wrapping up the evening with a program from Black, Brown, and Digital. BB Digital is what we call it. And that is curated by Darren Mallet and Empress Vernado. One current student, one just recent grad, and some of the filmmakers whose work you're going to see, who are the producers of various new web series that are very amazing. The work that's coming out of both out of the New School as well as emerging makers. It's what they're doing with nothing these days is really something. I mean, no budget. That's when I say I mean nothing, no budgets. And the work is still phenomenal. So with that, first on our agenda, we have an amazing documentary that we're going to see right now. And I'm very thrilled to have the maker and executive producer here with us today, Dr. Keith Nurse, all the way from Barbados. And his film is called Forward Home, The Power of the Caribbean Diaspora. And we'll have a great panel discussion following that with Greg Rhem from HBO, who's in the audience, and a New School alum as well. And Gregory Jones, who hasn't quite arrived yet, who is a financial strategist, and he'll be joining us for that conversation with Dr. Nurse. And then after that, we have a little coffee break, because if this is not about one thing, it's about networking. So at the coffee break and at the reception and in between programs, I expect to see everybody up, mixing, mingling, exchanging cards, because that is also what a great deal of this is about today. So after coffee break, we have our next documentary by Roxana Walker Canton. Roxana, wave your hand, who's here from New Haven, Connecticut, Fairchild University, who has a documentary called Living Thinkers, an autobiography of Black women in the Ivory Tower. And when I saw this film last August at the Black Star Film Festival in Philadelphia, I said, I have to bring this to the New School, because I don't think we've seen anything about Black women in academia, to my knowledge, to this date. And it's a fascinating and very important piece. So following Roxana's film, we'll have a Q&A and conversation with Roxana and Dr. Tracy Ann Williams. Everybody knows Tracy Ann in here, right? Yes, all right. If you don't know her, you should. She is a faculty member here as well in gender studies and cultural studies, as well as the director of academic advising for the undergraduate program here, and an amazing scholar herself. And then we have a reception at 6:30. It's more mixing and mingling, and food. We'll actually have some food. And then we have the Black, Brown, and Digital program closing out the night. So if you can stay all day, please do. We want to keep you fed and happy, well-fed and happy. And if you have to go and come, we understand. But we're really thrilled to have you, and I'm looking forward to having some great dialogue with you. So like I said, be prepared to be interactive, because we don't allow you just to sit back around here, okay? That's what creatively speaking is. Okay. Okay, Tony, we're all set to go with Forward Home, The Power of the Caribbean Diaspora.
Guyana, Suriname, Jamaica, and the Dominican Republic. All unique and somewhat exotic Caribbean countries visited by thousands of tourists every year. Many coming from destinations far and wide. A significant amount, however, come from the diaspora, living in global cities. Who are these people, these diasporic tourists? And how do they contribute to the social and economic order of their home countries in the Caribbean?
It's really a thrill and pleasure to be able to bring the filmmaker, executive producer, star Forward Home with us today, Dr. Keith Nurse. Keith, come on down. As well as Greg Rhem, who is the director of HBO documentary films here in New York City, and New School alumni. You can in the middle somewhere, one of those two. As well as Gregory Jones, who is a banking strategist, financial strategist with GSA Closers. Oh, can you leave me this end one, Greg? Sorry. So I can just walk across you guys. On the far end. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. And I get to be the rose among thorns. I like these odds, too, by the way.
Oh, good for you.
Three of my really favorite people, for sure. No kidding. All kidding aside. These gentlemen are experts in their fields and are all very generous with their information, as well as their time, giving back to the community. You know, they don't have to do that, but they do. And I think their work is tantamount to that. You definitely can see it in their work. So I'd love to start off the conversation. Miranda Kay, I can't see you over there. Get over here so I can see you. Like I said, this is a very interactive conversation, so I get to ask the first couple of questions, and then please join in, especially all my students who are here. I expect to hear from you. But first, I'd just like to get each of you to talk a little bit more in depth about your work. Keith, you know, why you made this film. Gregory, how you see this kind of work affiliated with the work that you do. And then Greg Rhem, in terms of what HBO Documentaries does. So each of you have, we have to share.
Sure, that's all right.
Yes, and you guys have those two. Okay.
Thank you very much, Michelle. It's a pleasure to be here. I think this is my second trip to the new school, so it's getting more and more familiar. I didn't get lost getting here.
Thank goodness.
And it's such beautiful weather. I'm really happy to see so many folks here. It's like a spring day outside, so I'm really gratified that you're able to come and share the experience. Just quickly, this documentary actually came out of a research process. So we did the research first, and then IDRC, which is the International Development Research Center, said to us, we have some more money left over. Can you do something with the money? And I said, but of course. And then I contacted my good friend Lisa Wickham, who is the producer. And I told her how much money we had. And she was like, that's all? Anyway, Lisa did a miracle with the money that we had. And so when you look at the credits, there's a lot of enterprises that supported the effort. Several airlines, like Caribbean Airlines, several foundations, and so on, that really chipped in. So it's really a collective process. But the research project was entitled Strategic Opportunities in Caribbean Migration. Now, the reason why we chose that title is that if you look at the literature on Caribbean migration, a lot of the discussion is about the challenges. 99% of the literature talks about the problems with migration. And we wanted to exploit what were the opportunities, particularly from an economic and business standpoint, but also identifying how the social dimensions of it. And so we hired about 8 people altogether, researchers. We looked at diasporic tourism, linking Caribbean countries and global cities. So we looked at Dominican Republic and New York, and that was an obvious choice because the Dominican Republic population in New York is fairly substantial. In fact, based on the data, it's the largest ethnic community or migrant community in New York, even bigger than the Chinese. So that's fairly substantial in a major global city. Then we looked at the Jamaicans and London. It could have been Jamaicans and anywhere else. I mean, like Miami, New York, Toronto, but the Jamaicans everywhere in large numbers. Then we looked at Guyana and Toronto. That was a fairly obvious case too, because there are lots of Guyanese in both New York and Toronto. So we wanted to do Toronto. And last but not least, Suriname and Amsterdam. Well, it's really Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and The Hague, because the Surinamese diaspora is spread across those 3 cities. So that was the diasporic tourism angle. Then we also looked at financial services, We looked at the health sector, particularly nurses. We looked at biotechnology as an area of scientific diasporism, scientific diasporic flows, and last but not least, telecoms. And so we did try to capture the ways in which the diasporic economy is impacting on Caribbean economies as well as the home economies or the global cities, and it's very substantial. So from a diasporic tourism standpoint, countries like Guyana and Suriname, 70% of their tourist arrivals are diaspora. Yeah. So it means that without that flow, there would be no tourism industry. There would be no airlines flying there. You know, it would be a major catastrophe. But even places like Dominican Republic and Jamaica, 25 to 30% of their tourists are diaspora. Now, if you go and you talk to the tourism agencies about this, and I've done this many times now, there's like a blind spot. It's like a paradigmatic blind spot. People who look like us are not tourists. All right, so all of their marketing efforts, all of their strategies are focused on people who don't look like us. So there's that dimension to it. What we are also finding, and this is based on my current research, we're looking at diasporic entrepreneurship. And so we are currently interviewing several firms in different locations that tap into the diasporic market. So yesterday I went to visit Golden Crust. That has 120 locations all around the United States, serving over 2 million customers and so on. Then I went to VP Records, you know, one of the biggest distributors of Caribbean music in the world, and particularly reggae. But we're also doing several companies like in telecoms, Digicel, Lime. We've interviewed a company that's based in the US here recently, Boom, which is doing mobile banking in Haiti. They generated $825 million worth of revenue and $425 million worth of profit last year. We're doing Levi Roots from the UK. His company, he just announced in Jamaica last month or 2 months ago, is now worth £64 million. And the list goes on. So this is not chump change. This is not mom and pop shops that we tend to think. And so we've been trying to sell the idea that there is something called a diasporic economy and a diasporic market that is generated by the migration process. And it is a substantial component of Caribbean economies. We estimate for Jamaica, and we haven't done the study yet, but we, based on the data that we have, that 25% to 30% of the GDP of Jamaica is driven by the diasporic economy. That is phenomenal. So that's some of the work we're doing. We're hoping to do work on Haiti later this year along the same lines.
Well, I'm gonna come back to you, obviously, because I want to talk about your philosophy about the creative industries, because that's how I think Keith and I connected. When I heard him talking about film as one of the creative industries, I'm like, oh yeah, he's talking my language. So I want to get back to that. But in the meantime, Greg, you gonna grab one of those and give us a little bit of more in depth about your background and how media technologies fits into what you do.
Well, once again, my name is Gregory Jones. Just congratulations again. I think that was an amazing documentary. I love them. But they also remind me how much of a Yankee I am because my family's from Trinidad and you would never know just listening to my voice. But my background is in banking, in real estate development. My probably claim to fame in New York City is I put the ATMs in Duane Reade for Chase. Every time I get a chance to say that, I'm going to say it, you know. But the great thing about the opportunity of being a banker and a financial strategist is that I've been doing it for a very long time, about 20-something years. I'm 45, in case people are saying, when did you start, at 6, you know? But Chase and the London School of Economics and Harvard, I got a lot of exposure to what isn't true about finance. That's what's so funny. I'm not knocking my education, but I am saying that working with the United Nations in the economic reform policies, because that's where I got most of my experience, I visited every single Caribbean island there is, both small and large. I've done the political and economic assessments of these islands. But the thing that I always try to explain to people, that it doesn't matter what you're trying to do there is a business and a social economic reality that goes unnoticed. For instance, we just invented a credit profile builder that basically can create brand new credit profiles. The benefit of it is that if you're trying to launch, like when the work I've done in Haiti, Haiti had something almost in the amount of $822 million that has disappeared. Now, most people have never been to Haiti. That's the problem with Haiti. But if you had a chance to go there and you look at how the rebuilding effort, it matches the same exact status that it was prior to the earthquake. The reason for that is it's just simple. It's financial illiteracy. People do not know how to track money, nor do they know how to spend it intelligently, nor plus the power is on this side of the coin, meaning in the United States, we have the ability to create enterprises that once we establish them here in this country, their economic impact is severe and very, very powerful. And that's kind of what we do with USA Closers. If we're not doing financial work, we're building affordable housing. I do not get into the luxury market. I'm not interested in it. My thing is building affordable housing worldwide. And the way you do it is by leveraging the capital markets. Social entrepreneurship is actually at its all-time high. The reason why I love the concept of social media, because it just allows for the message to get out a lot quicker. But when you're looking into this area, the reason why I would have backed this film had somebody told me about it is because what it does is it tells the story of the ignorance that they just do not market. They take for granted that these folks are going to show up there. You know, like my wife is from Guyana. And the thing about it, she hasn't been back. But it's funny, but the rest of her family does go on a regular basis. So when you're looking at, I know in relation to what I do to this kind of work, the thing that I'm probably most pressed to do as of last year moving forward is coming up with not only the platform financially, but creating the leverage so that everyday folks like yourself sitting in the audience, you may have an idea about a service or a product you want to export or bring in from that part of the world, is creating the opportunity for you to do it. So I'm an expert at raising money. That's what I tell people. So if you have an idea, don't throw it by the wayside. Put it on paper. Do it in a one-page business plan. Let me just say this in closing. As a former banker at Chase, none of us read business plans that are 30 pages long. There's an old saying that it doesn't take a long time to tell the truth. And I'm telling you now, you can say it in 1 page or less. There's a good book called The One-Page Business Plan by a good friend of mine, by Mr. Rhem. Get that book, summarize it. I'm not saying don't submit it. Don't go against, you know, the request of institutions when they ask for them. But I'm telling you from a very practical, prudent standpoint, we don't read them. So, I mean, you don't exist, so why would it take you 40 pages to tell me about something that doesn't exist yet? Tell it in 1 page, because as an investment, as an investor myself, that's what I look for. I want to see that somebody can get to it very, very quickly. So, thank you.
Thank you, Greg. And I don't want all the filmmakers in the audience hounding Greg as soon as he comes off the stage now that he said he's always raising money. Greg Rhem.
I don't raise money, but I do stop at the Chase
ATMs.
Yes, ATMs at Dwayne Reed. So thank you. Now I know who to thank. And congratulations as well, Dr. Keith, for your film. I mean, because the idea of diaspora is a very important one. I think people tend to think, as you're saying, that that we're not tourists. I mean, although I personally am not directly from the Caribbean, although there may be some connections that I'm not aware of. I'm a tourist here in New York City because now I live in Jersey, but that's beside the point. But that said, I think it's interesting, as you mentioned, that they don't. These countries rely on all sorts of tourism, and they don't seem to market to people who don't have a certain shade of skin. One of my favorite ads from as a kid for Jamaica was that one ad that everyone knows, the beautiful woman in the T-shirt, and yet I knew they weren't really marketing to people like me, and especially when you see the ads on the television and so on. So it's really sad that that happens, but it's good that you're making people aware of that, and hopefully spreading the word to these businesses that are doing that. In terms of documentaries, what do? I'm Greg Rhem, HBO Documentary Films. I do this a lot all day long, not in such a big, beautiful space with a lot of people surrounding me, but I watch movies all day long, all week long. Actually just came back from Missoula, Montana, doing this same sort of thing. And
Big Sky.
Big Sky Documentary Film Festival. So if you ever get a chance to go to Missoula, even if you don't know where it is, you should find it and go there. It's a wonderful festival. And I meet a lot of filmmakers, a lot of independent filmmakers, and a lot of veterans, and look for new stuff for HBO documentary films. We reject a lot more stuff than we pick up, and so therefore I don't get to spread the love in terms of acquisition fees and completion funding for films. But that said, there are a few that pop up here and there that we get lucky enough to pick up, and I'm lucky enough to be a part of. Actually, we have an Oscar-nominated film coming up March 2nd, so hopefully we'll cross our fingers for Prison Terminal and its filmmaker Edgar Behrens, that hopefully will pick an Oscar this year. And actually, and as Michelle's mentioned, I'm alumnus of the New School, and it's been quite an experience to have been here at this institution, which was beneficial to my career experience. I've been in the business for about 30 some odd years, but at HBO for 19, and I have to say it's one of the key experiences was coming to school here. So it was really cool.
That's a perfect segue into what else I wanted you to actually speak about, and that is a little bit about how does HBO utilize media technologies to expand their audiences. I mean, besides the broadcast, there's others, HBO To Go and all those other entities.
It's expanding. You know, again, I've been there. I haven't been there since the inception, obviously, but I think personally, 95 when I got there is around the time that it was starting to transform and becoming HBO that everyone really knows and seeks. And that said, also was a time when the industry, media-wise, was changing. If you're talking about documentary films, and also just films in general, people were still shooting a lot on film, celluloid. And if you were talking about shooting on video, people thought you were either going to shoot something for TV news or you were an independent filmmaker as showing something on public access. So it wasn't really, or maybe home movies. So that has changed the landscape tremendously. And when it comes to getting, expanding the word about what we do and spreading the love in terms of sharing our materials, it's gone beyond that broadcast. And I know now that our business affairs folks, when they deal with documentarians, new filmmakers, we're looking at so many different rights now than we were before because of the fact that we're spreading our love beyond the 30 million, subscriber televisions out there. We're actually, as you mentioned, HBO Go, and hopefully we'll start someday producing things directly for that. But also when it comes to social media, as you mentioned before, we have a staff that are sitting down there tweeting, and I personally don't tweet. Maybe
Shame on you, Greg.
I know. I sing occasionally.
As a media studies alumni.
It's too much work. The problem is that although I have a Facebook page, all that stuff is just so complex in terms of energies and such. And I've got 5 million other things going in my mind. That said, and as I told my boss, Sheldon Evans, a long time ago, it doesn't matter if you don't do it. Somebody does it. So you should be aware of it. And I think this plays to what both of you have said in your conversations and in your film as well, is that, if you're not, expanding your mind enough to be aware of that particular facet, you're going to miss out on such, a potential audience and spreading the word. Because way back when, we had a thing called HBO Mobile, which is sort of a prelude to HBO Go, where you can get HBO literally on every phone and every tablet and so on. But before there were tablets, and when cell phones were even smaller, we were sitting down in meetings, they were saying, who's going to want to watch anything on that little thing? I'm not going to sit down there and type. I can barely get my fingers on a button, let alone watch something like that. And I said then, it doesn't matter if you do it. Somebody will do it. And it doesn't matter if you're going to communicate, yes, most people are now, back then, are still sending us letters, actual physical letters, and calling us on the phone. But there will come a time when someone's going to send emails and is going to send text messages about us. And right after they view our programs, they're going to want to communicate with their friends and family and tell them more about the films and communicate with the filmmaker. So what we're doing now here, and you do it through creative speaking and web as well, but this kind of thing we do now with our documentaries. So the night of the broadcast on a Monday night, suddenly there's communication sometimes going on, Q&As with the filmmakers. So we're definitely trying to expand in that direction more and more. And I think, you know, the old school will definitely key in more with the new school eventually. So.
Give way to, right?
Yes, it has to happen.
Okay, this is my last question, then I'm coming to you guys in the audience. But Keith, could you just talk a little bit about your philosophy about the creative industries and why you chose film to tell this story, the format of film to tell this story?
Well, as I indicated, that the money was available, but I always knew that film is a powerful medium. And so, for example, I keep telling people now whenever I show this documentary, more people have seen this documentary than have read all my collective written works. Already. And
you've only had the film. Tell us what you've done with the film.
Yeah, the film has been around for about 2.5 years now. It's been screened in several Caribbean countries, so in Jamaica, Suriname, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, and several other territories. But it's been shown in El Salvador, in Colombia. It's been screened in several African countries, including Lesotho, Tanzania, and some that I don't even know about anymore. It's gone on its own.
It's a life of its own.
Yeah, but we've screened in several European countries, and particularly key institutions. So we've screened it at the ACP, which is the African Caribbean Pacific Secretariat, at the Commonwealth Secretariat, at the OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. I've shown it at IDRC, OAS in November, December, in front of all the Caribbean ambassadors in Washington, D.C. And we've shown it at a few festivals, so the American Film Institute in Washington, D.C., and several other festivals around the world. So it's really taken on a tempo of its own, a life of its own, and I think it's a really good complement to the written work. And so that someone who wants to get more information can tap into that source, and vice versa. But really, this opens up a window of scholarship, and so I keep encouraging my academic colleagues to pursue this, because there's a way in which, particularly for our students who are now part of the Google generation and whatever, their attention span is a bit different. So in fact, the way in which I teach, I don't lecture anymore. It's every class is a workshop, and we use the technologies to facilitate that. And so, I mean, I do a lot of research on the creative industries. I've been doing so for almost 20 years now. So I want to, like, you know, put out a disclaimer like my colleague here. And really, one of the key areas where the Caribbean has globally competitive advantage is in the creative industries. I think that has begun to slip because we've been far too slow to embrace the new frameworks of management to really push and promote these industries. And so most Caribbean governments and societies are now keyed into the creative industries. In fact, some of them have started to implement business plans that I wrote way back when. In fact, one of them just introduced key elements of a business plan that I wrote 15 years ago. And I was like, but there was no Facebook back then, you know. And so that's how slow we're moving. And really, if we don't move faster, if we don't accelerate the process and do some of the things that, you know, that we were involved in, running an incubator, for example, and a market development program that we were doing in Toronto for the Caribbean Tales Worldwide Distribution, of which I'm the chairman. So if you're not doing that kind of stuff, you're not moving the filmmakers and the other creative producers closer to the marketplace so that they can actually exploit the opportunities. So philosophically, yes, it's nice to have your art, but as Kamal Braffett once says, it's good to have your art and eat too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Greg, you want to add anything to that? Gregory.
What I would also say is that the challenge for anyone working in this industry is that the definition of, you know, Caribbean diaspora is, it's evolved. If you go back 500-600, I mean, if you go back about 500 years, you know, the interaction between the Caribbean and the Western world was a way for the Spaniards to interact with the mining business. But now if you look at it in its modern context, there's so much opportunity. See, I always look for places where there's absolute economic chaos, because that means that's a chance. The fact that there's only one nation that has escaped the developing nations list in the Caribbean, which is Trinidad. So however, natural gas amounts to approximately 80% of their export, 40% of their GDP, only 5% of the jobs are in Trinidad. So that's a huge amount of opportunity. Now, the challenge also, and this is where creative media can help, is that the viewpoint, and that's why I love the film, the viewpoint of the Caribbean as just some place for tourism has to evolve. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, there's so much going on, so they don't even view it. It's been said in economic circles that, I remember my professor at Harvard said, it doesn't even have an economic base. It's nothing more than a tourist destination. Say that to the Chinese, because they're over there, okay? The thing I tell folks is that's going to be your mission if you're going to work in the creative media industry. You got to tell the story and evolve the definition of what it is to be Caribbean. Right now, we mitigate it to just our cultural, myopic views of it, which is too limited. And that's another reason. So if you're telling it through the tale of being Trinidadian or Jamaican or from Suriname, Guyana, what happens is it's a family and it's a culture of subcultures. But the subcultures make up a larger culture, which is the business of the Caribbean. So that's what you're charged with. Now, I know from someone in my background, what we're charged with is I have to go now translate that into return on investment. But the cool thing about media is that it allows me to tap into something I refer to as return on emotion, because that's what we're going to have to tap into, emotional intelligence at this point. Dollars go but so far. But if we tap into the feelings of a people, you tap into the spirit of what that story and how it can be told, that is what I want to be a part of. That's why thank you for today.
Thank you, Gregory. You want to add anything, Greg? No? Okay. Questions from our audience. We have two young ladies with microphones, so please just raise your hand so we can get to you with a microphone. I'll get Carlton right there.
Thank you, Keith. One of the people in your film had mentioned that $100 million was spent in marketing from Jamaica. Is that number accurate? And do you have any idea how much of that is channeled to people of color or through people of color? Could you hold the mic a little closer? I'm sorry. Yeah. You want me to rephrase it? Okay. One of the individuals in your film, Keith, talked about $100 million being spent by Jamaica alone in marketing. Do you have any idea how much of that is spent or channeled through people of color? Or how much is being marketed to people in Europe or Australia as opposed to people in the diaspora? And are there any plans in motion to kind of redirect some of that?
That sounds like my next research project. I don't have the answer specifically. I just know that Jamaica's expenditure on advertising and marketing tourism is close to that figure. I suppose it fluctuates depending on the economic circumstance. Jamaica is facing some serious financial situations. They've gone back to the IMF, so they're on their standby agreement and all that sort of thing. So it's critical. It's a really interesting question to ask. Where are these resources being spent, and how are they being spent? I mean, just to run an ad in the New York Times or to have an ad on CNN is quite a big chunk of money. And Jamaica has been doing that for several years. So you can always see on CNN or some of the other major cable channels an ad about Jamaica. So that takes up a lot of money. And who are the people involved in that industry? Well, it's the high-end advertising industry based here in New York. The people who would have shot the film would be from New York or from London, and would be big companies. What we have been trying to suggest is that we need to be able to market in a more sophisticated way to the diasporic populations. Because one of my interviewees asked me a really interesting question, which is a burning question. What is going to happen to our marketability of Caribbean products and services when we hit the 4th and 5th generation Caribbean populations? Is our market going to die right in front of us? That was the question. And my response was, well, when the Jewish lobby and the Jewish diaspora are talking about their future, they don't talk about it dying out. They make sure that it doesn't die out. They create the institutional capacity to replicate their identities. They're not leaving it to chance. They're not leaving it up to the winds of fortune. They are strategically investing in their future. Now, if the data that I've shared with you about the economic impact of the diaspora to Caribbean countries is correct, then Caribbean governments and Caribbean institutions need to take this more seriously and target and have a program of action dedicated to ensuring that our diasporas continue to live on forever and expand. So I take your point, I understand the question, but I'm suggesting that there's this underlying thematic that we need to grapple with, which is really, I think, the crux of the matter.
Hi, my name is Ira Simone. I just wanted to say, what I appreciated a lot about your documentary, Keith, is that you provide a more nuanced understanding of what tourism is in the Caribbean today, which is very different from how tourism has been framed by only exploring the vertical relationships between the West, corporations, and the Caribbean locally, by looking at the actual contributions of diaspora communities to national economies in the Caribbean, which is something I don't think is given enough attention. But I have another question for you, sir. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. Sitting next to Keith? Yes, you.
Greg.
Yeah. In the case of Haiti, I'm not sure, what do you think about the sort of economic position of the diaspora in the country, considering that half of the population in Haiti is very much, has been dispersed throughout South America, considering that a lot of Haitians have migrated to places like Brazil, and Brazil has, in a sense, been very dependent on the domestic labor of Haitian migrants. I'm trying to understand, what position does this diaspora still have in a place such as that you may classify as being in a state of economic crisis?
Thank you for the question. There's two Haitis. There is the economic existence of Haiti, and then there's the cultural identity of Haiti. The cultural identity of Haiti can be exported, imported, wherever that individual who has that social tie to it. When I refer to the state of crisis, I'm referring to the economic situation of Haiti. Haiti has been isolated. Like, I've been on safari in Africa, and I've watched hyenas pick off the weakest animal. In my opinion, and like I said, I stand strong on it, and I have no worries by anybody. I can defend this position from being there. Haiti has been isolated. It is on the other side of the Hispaniola Mountains. I find it disgusting that the Dominican Republic can have that type of economic boom, and Haiti has none. I'm not talking about some, I'm talking about none. It has been isolated politically. The couple of political, socioeconomic endeavors that the United States has taken role in fact, President Clinton plays a large role in some of the things that they've tried to launch. But to see, without getting long-winded, the challenge with economics as it relates to politics is there's always going to be a loophole for the 1%. So on the surface, like for instance, either the richest people in the world, like I'm considered wealthy, right? But the richest people in the world, the top 1%, are all of a sudden become the most ecumenical, generous people. You have Ted Turner pledging $1 billion to the United Nations. You have Bill Gates giving all his money, no, Warren Buffett giving all his money to Bill Gates, and then Bill Gates is in Africa. Africa is another place that's very romanticized. You haven't been there yet. It's another, it's like a larger version of Haiti. It's very, very fragmented. It's a continent, but it's very, very fragmented. And what people do is they confuse the cultural identity of that continent and that country like Haiti with the socioeconomic crises these countries are in. You mentioned, Dr. Nurse, about Jamaica going back to the IMF. The central banking situations in these countries is ridiculous. If you just took a little bit of time and go into Wikipedia, you ain't even got to get too deep, and you start looking at the statistics and you see what happened in the 1960s, they have a series of events from 64 to 77 in every single Caribbean nation where they have what's called non-financial institutions, NFIs. They collapsed them the same way. Some of you may be too young to remember this, but the same way the mortgage collapse of the junk bond scandal in the 80s here. And what happened as a result of that, the Resolution Trust Corporation got created, which sold the most expensive properties in the United States for pennies on the dollar. That created the wealth of people like Carlton Sheets, these late night real estate gurus, the Robert Kiyosaki's, Robert Allen. They were buying property. Well, the challenge with doing that in the Caribbean is that the economic, the room for it is much more dramatic. See, America can survive it because we have a lot of ways to make money here. In the Caribbean, they just do not. So a small percentage of people had it. So now what happens in its place, you have a ruling class of bureaucrats. There's different names for them, the bourgeoisie. You can call them whatever you want. The money in Haiti has completely disappeared. The IMF has no idea where it went. The World Bank has no idea where it went. I'm not the world's expert on Haiti, but I can tell you where it went, because all I have to do is look at the list of where it went and then say it stopped with you, so you stole it. It's not a real, I don't have to be Sherlock Holmes, but my point in mentioning Haiti is, on this type of platform is, that's the story that needs to be told. See, the Western Hemisphere, primarily the United States, we hold the responsibility of being a world citizen if you don't want to, even if you don't want to. We have to get the tail out. If you look at what happened in Kiev
I don't want to interrupt.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Greg, because this is a topic I would love to have, and there's people in the audience who I know who would love to be in on this conversation. But because the whole Haiti Dominican Republic thing, people know that I have a real concern about having just returned from Dominican Republic as well.
It's just out of control.
But it's a whole nother day. We should have a conference about that, and you'll host it. Okay, great. And by that time, maybe Keith, you'll have your second film done. I'm about 8.
Yeah, man.
Okay. I'm sorry. Question over here.
Sorry about that, folks.
I tell you, these gentlemen have a lot of information. Yes.
Yes, Dr. Nurse, love the film. Thank you for your efforts in bringing this to the forum, to the mindset. But I want to go back to the first question, because it was posed in a way that I think is misleading. He said in the film that Jamaica spent $100 million on advertising. That's not true. The hotel owners spent $100 million in advertising. The question is, what is the relationship of ownership of land that is occupied by Sandals and all the other resort owners to Jamaica legislation? Is the money, so like in America, you can own certain things or you can lease them. America will lease you something, or sometimes they let you own something. The question is, who owns tourism, the tourist industry in the Caribbean? Is it owned by the countries, or is it owned by the white American, European resort owners? So when you hear that term, Jamaica spent $100 million in advertising, the country Jamaica doesn't have $100 million. So they didn't spend $100 million in advertising. The resort owners spend it, and then they determine who gets where the money goes, who gets the advertising contract. So I just want to bring that to the forum, because I think sometimes we throw out this misunderstanding that the countries are wealthy. It's the people who own the resorts who spend the money, not the countries.
Hold on, we need the mic. If you
need the mic.
You said,
I don't want to say anything but that.
Yeah.
It's a big difference between
Yeah, that's
$100
what
million Jamaican dollars and $100 million. Huh?
It's U.S. dollars.
Okay.
You're not spending, they're not advertising Jamaica to Jamaica.
okay, let Dr. Nurse respond. Okay.
Clearly, people want me to make that next documentary. I mean, I've done lots of research on the tourism industry. The tourism industry in the Caribbean is such that the hole in the bucket is very big. What we mean by that is that based on the quantum of resources that passes through, no more than about 10–15% actually is retained in the country. Okay? Now, in some countries, like Costa Rica is probably one of the best in Latin America and the Caribbean. Close to 60% of what is spent in tourism industry stays in Costa Rica. So that's why Costa Rica is becoming more and more a progressive economy and so forth, higher levels of employment, higher levels of wages, and so on. No, Barbados is still fairly low. That's because, you know, all the food is imported, a lot of key services are imported, the ownership structures are such that most of the hotels are owned by foreigners. But I mean, you know, one of the biggest hoteliers in the Caribbean is Butch Stewart from Jamaica. So, you know, and he's just bought out the biggest hotel in Barbados. So, you know, some of it is staying in the Caribbean, some of it is in the hands of Caribbean entrepreneurs. But the key point, though, is this. And this is what we're trying to indicate in the documentary. The diasporic tourists impact the tourism sector in a different way. They tend to stay longer. They tend to spend more on local goods and services. And they are not just tourists in a classic sense. So before they arrive, a barrel is sent, or they may actually own property back home, and so they're paying for the mortgages. And they're doing a whole complex of things, of which tourism is only one component. And so, really, they are different kind of tourists. Some entrepreneurs are really tapping into this. So, for example, the woman sitting next to me on the flight coming up from Barbados, we were on JetBlue. She says that, you know, JetBlue is flying to Trinidad for the first time on Monday. And I was like, wow. I said, interesting timing. She says, yeah, it's Carnival. All right? So, if we don't understand the opportunities, meaning Caribbean people, wherever they are, if we don't spot the opportunities, if we don't tap into those opportunities, other people will. Okay? And so the issue at hand is, what are we doing? Not what other people are doing to us. It's that we've been debating that for the last 500 years. That has very little currency. The question is, what are we doing for ourselves? Yeah? And the answer is, well, we keep waiting for other people to do it for us. And it ain't happening. All right? And so, you want to make a film about something? Well, you know, go ahead. Find the resources. And really, it's about galvanizing our capabilities. You know, all the research were done mostly in the Caribbean. The filmmaking, all done in the Caribbean. We think that we can make films of just equivalent quality. This is BBC ready. We created it with that framework in mind so that, yeah, you know, I'm going to go knocking on the doors of HBO documentaries to say, hey, guy, you know, we have a documentary that, you know, we would like to have on HBO. So it's that kind of thing. So I don't want to get fixated on how much money Jamaica spent, because the tourism sector brings in billions of dollars into the tourism economy in Jamaica and elsewhere. And so the question at hand is the point that you made earlier, Greg. What is the return on the investment? If you're spending $100 million and you're getting back $2 billion, then it's a good return. And that's the question we should be asking.
Yes, question right here. And then Marina Kay next. And then we're going to have a coffee break. And in fact, if anybody wants to start on the coffee, as long as you do it quietly and don't cross the video camera line, feel free. Yes.
Hi, my name is Candace White. I am a television producer and a first semester graduate student here in the Media Studies Department. And I was actually heartened to see, doing research. I'm from Trinidad. I'm first generation Trinidadian. And definitely, I've never thought of myself as a diaspora tourist before. I've never heard that term, and I go back to Trinidad all the time. So it's very lovely to see that there's almost a label for me. What I found heartening at one point, I was looking at universities in Trinidad. I was thinking of maybe teaching, in particular, news literacy, the consumption of news and how it's done. And I noticed that there's a school of journalism within the University of Trinidad and Tobago, one of the sort of newer, lovely models of education that I think it has such great potential. So I wanted to ask, in general terms, of course, diaspora kind of goes both ways. You know, we're here and we go back, but there seems to be like a wonderful opportunity for, you know, sort of like learning and teaching creative journalism, filmmaking, all of those things in Trinidad or in the Caribbean countries at a university level. I find a lot of people who come to the, sort of a creative role come to it organically. They want to be creative, they have ideas, they want to put it to film, to music. But it's lovely to see that there's a school there teaching the basics, you know, everything from, you know, if you're a journalist, what's ethically correct and what one has to do when one researches, the basics. Is there a shift going on then? From afar, it seems so, and I would love that if it were so. But is there a shift sort of like on the educational map for this type of creativity to have a very strong foundation like we have here academically? So that's my question, if you're seeing it. And I had one other. You mentioned something, Greg, I forgot your last name, but the middle Greg, which was Trinidad escaped, or was the only one that escaped developed nation status. And I wanted to know why you used that terminology. It was, I'm paraphrasing probably, but it just caught my attention. So 2 questions.
Yeah. Journalism is not my field, of course, but there is a rapid rise in both the expenditure by the government of Trinidad and Tobago on education, of which the investment in the University of Trinidad and Tobago is an example. And there's a definite increase in media-related training, both in the audiovisual sector, animation. So there's an animation school at University of Trinidad and Tobago as well. And there's several other initiatives. So there's a bit of a boom in that area going on in Trinidad. So I would encourage you to, you know, stake it out. But just quickly though, to add, you know, there's a critical role between the role of the diaspora and the economies back home. In our research, we refer to it as brain circulation. Because a lot of literature has talked about brain drain, and the Caribbean has the highest brain drain rates in the world. So countries like Guyana and Suriname, close to 90% of the tertiary educated population have migrated. And so how do you advance a society when most of your brains have leaked out? And so the way to do it, and this is what we are actually working on right now in terms of research and building things like business incubators and so on, is to bridge the divide and allow for the circulation of knowledge, circulation of expertise, and so on. And so that's the things that we're talking with the governments about. How do you create a framework for that? Now, if you look at the success of China and India in particular in the last 20, 30 years, the role of their diasporas was absolutely critical to their success in recent years. All the achievements in science and technology in China would not have been possible without them tapping into the diaspora. And they have framed a whole strategy on that basis. Same for India. They have a whole program targeted, Indians abroad and so on. They allow them and their children up to 4 or 5 generations to invest in India, to access free education in India, and the list goes on, okay? Most countries in our part of the world haven't yet gotten to that point of sophistication in terms of a strategy targeting the diaspora. And so, yes, we need people like you to be, bridging that divide and offering your services and leveraging your intellectual property.
Yes, and briefly, what I meant by that, a developing nation, according to the United Nations, is what we used to refer to as the third world. They don't use it anymore. It's like the word poor. They just don't like using these words. It escaped that list in 2011 because of its economic development as a country. And that's what I meant by expressing they have several natural resources, but the main one is natural gas. It constitutes 80%. It's huge. In fact, there is a lot. The central bank, there's a lot that went into it. It exploded. But it wasn't something that required the work of a brain surgeon. It's just like you just said, it's that circulation of intellect. But intellect has a funny thing. It likes to follow where the money's going. So the money went into Trinidad. And conversely, what happened? The economy expanded. There's a natural resource every human has. We only tap into what, 5% of our potential? I have these conversations about Guyana because my wife is from there. But my point to Trinidad is if you just follow the course of events from 2006 to 2011, it's an amazing tale. It's an amazing tale.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, last question before we go to coffee break.
Thank you for your film. I'm from Jamaica. And like you say, Jamaicans are everywhere. I have so many things to say. But anyway, I really think a lot of these Caribbean countries, their problems range from their government. I've looked at Jamaica over the years, okay, and I realize that when, say, America doesn't like what's happening in that country, they send in the FBI, the CIA, okay? And then you hear this person is a communist, and there's so many things I've seen happen in Jamaica that it really pains me through, where people can't eat, and Seaga wins, and the next morning the shops are full of food. And then Air Jamaica. We don't have an airline anymore.
It's called Caribbean Airlines.
Yes. And Butch Stewart was involved with Air Jamaica. There's a history about that. So I think that we need to not look at, what do you think about the people, the citizens of these islands need to really get together and do something, because I think the governments are just really not really doing what they should be doing. What do you think?
That's another conference too, right?
That's another conference. And you want me to say this on air? On video?
It's okay.
No, it's very easy to identify governments as the whipping boy. They are really the monkey of last resort. We can always, target them and criticize governments for not doing X, Y, and Z. I don't fall into that particular framework. Many of our governments do have challenges, and sometimes I'm very concerned about the people that we select to represent us. But we, the people, make that selection. And so I'm not just concerned about the leaders, I'm also concerned about the followers. And so we do need to take some of the followers to task as well, the people who do the voting and so on. As that may be the case, let me also say something about the example that you've just used, the airline industry. Air Jamaica was largely insolvent for many years. In fact, most small island territories cannot afford airlines, but they cannot afford not to have them, because otherwise you are at the mercy of American Airlines. So for several years, you know, St. Lucia, for example, was paying American Airlines about $14–15 million US to fly people into St. Lucia. They have to pay to cover these flights coming in. And so the question then is, what is the return on the investment? Now, what is happening organically, maybe too slowly, is that we are actually moving to one Caribbean airline. So that Caribbean Airlines, which is largely funded by the government of Trinidad and Tobago, has taken over the routes and the facilities and the staff of Air Jamaica. Now, I think that is a really important transition, because collectively, I think we are stronger rather than having individual airlines. And that's not going to work. And so the next one is LIAT. LIAT, I think, has to be absorbed within Caribbean Airlines for it to actually function, and so on. But there are lots of new competitors. So I indicated JetBlue. JetBlue has targeted several islands in the Caribbean, and they are doing amazing business there. But there are indigenous firms as well. There's Fly Jamaica. That's just starting to tap. That's flying from Kingston to New York, and I think Miami. And then there's Fly Guyana. That's also starting up. And so it's a very competitive environment. The airline business is a tough business to be operating in. So you know, my hats go off to those folks. I think I'll end there. And closing statement is that those of you who live in global cities and are part of the Caribbean diaspora, and a term that I learned yesterday, the term was used, friends of Jamaica or friends of the Caribbean, play a critical role in terms of shaping the options for countries back home. That process needs to be galvanized. And so I'm really heartened that Michelle asked me to come and screen a documentary. In fact, I participated in Creatively Speaking radio program some months ago. And so we need to get this story out. The story that there's a critical role, a strategic role for the diaspora in Caribbean development. And we need to figure out, you know, how to get this done faster and better. And I think that's my last words. Thank you very much.
Greg, closing statement.
No, just it's very brief. Just thank you, and I just challenge everybody to challenge yourself. That's really it. Just expand your paradigm and look for a way to participate in the way that you know best. I can't tell you that. You always know what your own situation is. Just thank you for having me.
Greg?
Well, I think playing off of what both of you have said, the idea, well, what Dr. Nurse had mentioned about blaming things on them, the government, the bigger people, and so on. You know, I think it's a bad habit because, as you mentioned, or as in the case here, you made this film. So if you thought there was a problem, you started to address it. And I think, and what you just mentioned, the same thing, is that the technology is there for everybody to grab a camera, a microphone, and start to explore different issues they think are important, be it a case of diaspora or any other issue. I see stuff all the time. I think about the Caribbean. I thought of a film called Life and Debt about Jamaica and the problems in terms of finance. You should go out and get it if you can find it on Amazon.
Stephanie Black, Life and Debt.
Wonderful film. And there's another case where people just grabbed the camera and said, let's address this issue and bring it to the forefront. And then suddenly everybody's aware of it, because on every platform, suddenly people are talking about, you have to see this film. You have to, let's talk about this issue. And same thing, we're starting dialogue here. You can start dialogues elsewhere. And it doesn't have to be just through creative speaking. You can do it on your own as well. And so I think it's best to get out and start making more stuff. And maybe, hopefully, some of it will be on HBO as well. So
Thank you so much, Greg Rhem, Greg Jones, and Keith Nurse. I just want to mention there's a film that's actually going to be shown at Lincoln Center starting this coming Friday called Fatal Assistance Mortale by Raoul Peck, a Haitian filmmaker, and he will be there for Friday and Saturday and talk about the real story behind what happened to the money in Haiti. Yeah. It's in that film. So if you're interested in learning more about that, please join Raoul Peck up at Lincoln Center. And we're going to take our coffee break now and come back at 4:30 for Roxana Walker Canton's film, Living Thinkers. Thank you so much, and thank you, gentlemen, again.